So that's what AI say pala, no? So ano masasabi mo, Ate Za?
Alam na kung sino yung bias niya, alam na kung sino yung nagke-create sa kanya tsaka nagko-control 'no?
So
Hindi
yeah,
pa kasi
so after all,
nagse-search.
this is the subject of digital diplomacy. So it's also important for us to know what does the AI say. So moving forward, let us now discuss the China's argument. Johan?
Alright, so for our next segment will actually be divided into like three main subsegments. Firstly, China's arguments regarding this whole issue. Secondly, the Philippines' arguments or case. And then thirdly, we'll be talking about what was the result of the deliberation and the arbitration before we head into a final conclusion of what our stance on the topic really is. China's argument. So, based on my research, okay, so the main article that I actually managed to look up when looking for China's stance is a statement made by their foreign ministry or like their Council for Affairs, which was made in 2016, which was a time where disputes were still a rather hot topic. So, China has like two main arguments in this case. Firstly, they have a huge emphasis when it comes to historical basis. And secondly, they hinge on the fact that it is actually the Philippines that is quote unquote aggressing on their sovereignty and their territory, which I find very interesting actually. So we're gonna dissect those two main arguments one by one. We'll be talking about the historical basis. So when we think about China's historical basis when it comes to like claiming territory, what's the one concept that comes to mind? Ano yan?
I'm gonna
It's
say,
the
is it the 9 dash line?
Exactly.
yes.
Yes.
It is the nine dash line, or if you don't know, it's also called as the 11 dash line.
Yes.
Oh,
So,
right.
guys, what exactly is the nine dash line? So, the nine dash line is the main basis for China declaring ownership or territory within the South China Sea. So, it is basically a visual representation of China's claims that appear on some Chinese official maps and comparative maps of disputed claims in the South China Sea. So, these lines signal the limits of Chinese territory writ, and Chinese scholars view this as a very, very important document, or rather concept. And there are three main things that the nine dash line actually outlines. So, firstly, is that the islands, rocks in the South China Sea, over which China asserts territorial sovereignty. Secondly, the nine dash line also highlights the maritime zones governed by the United Nations Convention Law of the Sea or UNCLOS. So they actually still incorporate that into their own beliefs. It's not just like only China's beliefs, okay? Thirdly, it also talks about the waters over which China has assets and some degree of non-exclusive historic rights. Let's go sa two arguments nila. Firstly, historical basis. So, based on my research, China says a lot of things regarding their historical basis when it comes to occupying these pieces of territory within the South China Sea. And they assert date back to ancient time. China refers to the islands within the South China Sea as the Nanhai Zhetao, and that the islands are their inherent territory, and that these islands were established to be theirs over the course of history. So, how do they say that it's established over a course of history? There are various levels to this argument. Firstly, interestingly, is they talk about multiple domestic pieces of literature that record their activities within those islands.
These literatures are their own, ano?
Yeah. This is the first part, domestic literature that actually records it. So, there are various examples of this that actually come from the different dynasties. Kasi diba we all know, China was like ruled by lots of dynasties like the Ming
Right.
Dynasty, the Han
Yeah.
Dynasty, the various records of literature. Like, in example, the Iwuche, or An Account of Strange Things, published in the Eastern Han Dynasty, which was around year 220, supposedly. And we also have the Lingwai Taita, or the notes for the land beyond the passes in the Song Dynasty, which is around the 12th century. So that's like really far back, you know? And we also have Tao Yi Lue, or a brief account of the islands, which was written in the Yuan Dynasty around the 13th century. So basically, they have a lot of domestic historical records that prove their occupation, their existence, their chronicling of those said islands. Secondly, diba, we talked about domestic literature.
Right.
It shows that Chinese people lived and carried out production of activities for like a really long time. So recap, una is like domestic literature. Secondly is like the way of life of Chinese fishermen. And then thirdly, more interestingly, another thing that quote unquote proves their historical basis is the existence of like many foreign documents. Diba kanina we talked about local documents. They also talk about various foreign documents. First example, we have Japanese literature, which is Bofu no Shima, published in 1940. And we also have the China Sea Directory, published in 1868, published by the UK. So we talked about three main things diba so far: domestic, way of life, second like foreign literature. And the last aspect, international recognition when it comes to like addressing yung ownership ng islands na yun. For example, when Japan invaded China in 1943 and when France invaded China in 1933, China was actually fighting for these waters during that time. So they're telling us that, you know, China has never ceased carrying out activities such as patrolling and law enforcement. Like this, like what they're doing right now within those waters, it's not a new phenomenon. They've always been doing that. And another thing, like last parang part of international recognition, is that these islands nga, they've also been present as China's territory in encyclopedias, in yearbooks that were published like even outside of China. So, yun nga, I think that's basically the meat, a lot of meat for China's historical basis. Based on their stance, it's very deeply rooted, no?
Yes,
Yeah.
actually.
Yes, I would say.
Like, hindi siya yung, it just didn't pop out of nowhere.
That's why they're confident. They're confident with their arguments,
And
with their
there's-
claims.
There are also documents to prove.
Exactly.
And I think
Internationally
that's,
and locally.
like, basically, this justifies what they're doing. They believe that there's historical basis behind it. Three main things. Kumbaga, three main reasons why ba't nagkakagulo in the first place. So firstly, they believe that the Philippines' invasion and illegal occupation caused disputes within China, or rather with China, over some islands and reefs of the Nansha Qingdao. And secondly, they state that the Philippines' illegal claim has no historical or legal basis. And thirdly, the development of the international law of the sea gave rise to dispute between China and the Philippines over maritime delimitation. They pointed out that the occupation daw ng Pilipinas is like illegal. They also talk about how the Philippines' unilateral initiation of arbitration is actually an act of bad faith that in a way disrespects China. Basically the gist of what I researched. What about you guys? What do you guys think about the Philippines case in all of this?
So it's interesting, right? Because like in our lens, China is the aggressor, and therefore they are the ones who do not have the legal basis. But if we're gonna look at Johan's stance or Johan's argument that is well researched, we could see na they really also have a document to prove
That's right.
their occupation or like dominance in the West Philippine Sea. So enough with that, and thank you for laying that information, Mr. Arcelia. Let us now discuss the Philippines argument. So me and Ateza would discuss. So first, if we're gonna look at it, if we're gonna observe Johan's overall statements or discussion, we could see that it's all based on historical rights, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's all based on
Actually.
historical evidence, just like local and international.
Yeah.
So, for the Philippines, we claim that historical rights claim of China over the West Philippine Sea has no bearing on sea disputes under UNCLOS. So, it's basically the Philippines argument will revolve around our obligations on UNCLOS. This convention gives each coastal state an EEZ. What is an EEZ, Miss Naomi?
Exclusive economic zone.
That's right.
So basically, UNCLOS is the convention, or like it's the international that is responsible in giving each coastal state its EEZ. And the fact that China is aggressing our Filipino fisher folks actually violate this convention. Second, the 9-dash line has no basis in international law. because China's 9-dash line is the demarcated borders of China that overlap with neighboring countries. Kasi 'di ba basically nag-resurface lang naman itong issue na to. Kumbaga mas pumutok siya these days because our Filipino fisher folks are being abused or being bullied, if I must say, because our right, since yung EEZ, di ba, it gives the coastal state the right to exploit its resources. And yung mga Filipino fisher folks natin kasi, ina-exploit nila yung resources na yun. Like, they're trying to fish there. But the Chinese vessels are trying to block them. Di ba, may instance pa ngang water cannon.
Nahabol.
Yeah, so basically, dinideprive tayo sa right to exploit our resources. So, yan yung pinaka-main argument or pinaka-problem natin with the disputing territory. Next, various maritime features that are presented upon by China are not islands, as they claim, and this does not generate entitlement to an EEZ or continental shelf. Because, if you guys can remember what Ambassador discussed, the rocks versus islands argument. According to Article 121, Paragraph 3, others are low tide elevations and others are still submerged, and this results to no generating entitlements beyond 12 nautical miles. China's reclamation activities do not lawfully change the original nature and characteristics of these features. You cannot change rocks into an island. So, I think Johan failed to actually address this argument of China.
I was gonna say na both China and the Philippines have actually agreed to, to be a part of this agreement, yung UNCLOS, to be under the United Nations. Right. So, mas siya present, mas may weight siya ngayon, ganon.
But I think the fact that both countries, Philippines and China, is a member of United Nations actually gives a legal bearing to this convention, right?
So, are you saying that China did itself bad?
And also, since Johan mentioned earlier, I think it's also important for, especially nowadays in this globalization era, to have an international institution that will be a medium for like different disputes, different problems, just like in trading, right? There's this WTO that facilitate trading or international trading. But so in our case, UNCLOS is the one who's responsible in negotiating or in disputes when it comes to seas. So I think it's only right for countries to submit to this convention or to this international institution. With that being said, China's breachment of the convention by not allowing Filipino fishermen to fish in the West Philippine Sea. So this is clearly an interference of the Philippine sovereignty and jurisdiction. UNCLOS give right to Filipinos as part of its EEZ. So therefore, yung mga ginagawa ng China or like past actions of China in the West Philippine Sea actually violates this right. We already know that China exerted its dominance in the West Philippine Sea, right? By building various infrastructures, by building artificial islands. This actually caused damage to our environment.
Through the reclamation activities of China, various destructive and hazardous practices were observed.
Like what?
Like destructions of coral reefs. Every opportunity that they have, they really use it. They really they really grab
Maximize it.
that, exactly. And harvesting of endangered species. Ayon, poaching.
I think poaching is legal water activities, which is China's doing right now in the Scarborough Shoal. Since professor that we've interviewed also mentioned why is it important for the Philippines to be assertive in terms of, or to be firm in terms of its claim over the over the Scarborough Shoal. It's not only because of the resources but also because of the detrimental effects of what China's doing in terms of getting poaching over that area.
And I also think that these violations actually speak a lot because, it could actually result to a more serious future actions of China. So, I feel like this, just like poaching, diba? Like, it's just as simple as illegal fishing activities, but China still does it. So, it has a great indication that China could actually do serious future activities.
Conduct those, like, let's say, harmful activities. Is that still a legal basis for, like, being, like, kunwari, diba territory mo siya and, like, you're not taking care of it? Is that, like, really a metric for saying that the territory shouldn't be yours? Kasi, like, shouldn't countries have, like, regardless of, like, if you own it, you have the right to use it. So, parang,
The thing is,
parang,
even
diba?
if like oceans have, even if like oceans have boundaries in the map, the effect of what poaching
Yeah.
is,
That's true.
it extends to us.
It's not just a China and Philippine issue. It's like
Yeah.
a global issue.
There are regulatory laws, there are already policies that even though it's within your territory, you should follow it because of the long-term effects and the domino effects
Yeah.
that it can produce.
And dagdag ko lang na yung China's reclamation activities, it does not lawfully change the original nature and characteristics of these features because you cannot change rocks into an island.
We've talked about China's case, we've talked about the Philippines case. So what does the ruling exactly say?
You have mentioned earlier why international organizations are important. Yes, they are not perfect. They are not perfect truly. But there is the effort. There are efforts being brought out by these international organizations to we have these international organizations to talk and meet in the middle. Whether you like it or not,
Oh.
there's already an award.
Yes.
Which the China reject. By the way.
There's already an award which was declared last 2016. They are under the jurisdiction or under the authority, whatever
They agreed.
yes, to be a part of whatever decisions United
To
Nations.
be bound. No?
Yes,
By the church.
we are to follow what is being followed, where everyone is under or in submission to. The award that was given to the Philippines that the Scarborough Shoal belongs to the Philippines. I'm sorry, Johan, it belongs to the Philippines.
What? I'm not Chinese.
It belongs to us.
So yung 9-dash line, hindi na siya nire-recognize or ina-accept because since there is already a set exclusive economic zone for each country, ito na yung dapat natin fina-follow. And
Yeah,
again, China and the
exactly.
Philippines
Yes.
are under that. And we also forgot to mention na ayun nga, since itong historic rights na kiniklaim ng China based on the 9-dash line, imaginary line na lang ito. Unlike with the EEZ, meron na siyang talagang,
Imaginary.
it is set,
All
it is
in your
written, it is, written na siya, bound na siya.
But in our defense, the DFA always say na there's no bearing than the 9-dash line.
Yeah. And also, just to add, under public international law, historical claims doesn't equate to historical titles. Okay. So therefore, historical claims by China cannot be a basis in terms of acquiring a territory.
And 9-dash line, it's out of the picture because our bases now are the exclusive economic zones.
Yes.
During one of our discussions regarding this, our professor said, di ba na, wala ring records na yung life na mga dead bodies. It is although it's a funny thing to say, pero it can serve as a powerful proof. And doon sa mga claim ng maritime features ng China, walang nahalap na ganong records.
I see.
Alright. So, it's just a feature. It doesn't have it doesn't give life. It's award was given to the Philippines na. Looking at what China is doing presently, it is more than trying to fight back. They are doing extreme activities
Yeah.
na. You have mentioned earlier how yung artificial island, di ba, nag-overlap na siya sa territory natin.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the other countries din, di ba? Kasi this is like a very highly contested.
Like
So,
Indonesia, Vietnam,
ASEAN,
Malaysia,
right? Yeah.
Brunei, even Taiwan.
Yung activities nila, it is hindi lang siya illegal but harmful na siya.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because like abuse sa coral reefs, yung yung pag-abuse ng China doon, just like what I've mentioned earlier, it is so harmful. It is extreme because while we cannot see it yet at the moment, meron siyang long-term effects
Yeah.
and domino effects.
So, kumbaga, hindi lang yung UNCLOS yung bina-violate ng China, but including yung environmental goals natin as part of the
I
United
see.
Nations.
As a global citizen.
Yeah.
So that like goes against yung mismong stance din ng UN, no? Kasi they're violating those rules like you've established earlier.
However, okay, yes, we have this award. There are still issues like, although like one of the things is yung boundaries. Yes, UNCLOS said that the Philippines rightfully owns the West Philippine Sea, but since since UNCLOS also has limitations with what they can impose, hindi sila nakapag-set ng boundaries na like kung hanggang saan lang dapat yung China, and then kung hanggang saan lang dapat yung Philippines, and especially with territorial sovereignty. We really cannot do so much about it na
That's true.
like sanction level. What we can do lang is talk with other
Diplomatic
organizations,
talks, yes.
Like we do
with
not
other
have that
countries.
capacity.
Yes, we
Yes.
don't have that
That's true.
capacity na to punish them.
First of all, let's go back to the interviews. First, yung interviews, we've observed na yung surface level nung alam nila, halos pare-pareho, right?
Yes.
Like, they
Yeah.
almost have the same sentiments towards, like, of course, pro-Philippines. And
Of
against,
course, we're Filipinos, right?
yeah, AI says. So, ano masasabi mo sa sinabi ng AI?
I really like what AI. It's really interesting how AI is able to come up with like such solutions,
But
no?
at the
or
same
like such
time,
opinions.
I feel like what AI have said can be really detrimental, especially since it's very easy for people to search it on AI and for them
Yeah.
to believe it
yeah.
without checking if the source of the AI was really, accurate
That's
or
true. Yeah, they still have the fact check
credible.
it.
AI really
And the
poses a
urge
significant
to
risk.
use this on academic papers.
Yes.
That's talagang AI is harmful.
That's why studying digital diplomacy is a must. And
Hey,
CIR.
that's the conclusion. That's the ultimate conclusion.
The conclusion here is
Okay, so what else, guys? What do you think na we can conclude in this discussion?
Let's move on to like the third segment where we talked about nga each case, the facts,
Yeah.
what's happening in status quo. I think our decision is clear based on our weighing as well.
Yeah.
Not the Philippines talaga, no?
Who
Like
owns?
not just as Filipinos, ha. Like
we're not
you've-
being biased here.
Yeah, you've clearly seen naman. We've laid out yung arguments ng China. We've tried to
Yeah.
pit them against yung, of course, yung stance ng Philippines. And we had a whole discussion regarding this. And I think we can really say that the Philippines, it's still justified for them to actually to continue to, establish their rights within
the-
these territories, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
I agree. And I also therefore conclude that this historical rights, this UNCLOS, this international convention, they also have loopholes, no? They also have
Yes, actually.
discrepancy na we as IR students should address and should observe.
I wanna say nga na now that we have discussed this, now that I know more, we know more,
Yeah.
I get China. I kind of get China.
You get the sentiments on why they're
Yes.
acting like that.
I
Yeah, I
guess
get it.
blame them. They already believe that because
And for me, like, after doing this segment and also after interviewing others, after knowing so much
Yeah.
more about this issue, we highly encourage you guys to be knowledgeable about these things also. And we never know, maybe the solution might come from you.
Yeah.
That's right. That's
What
right.
if you're the next future diplomat? What if you're the next future diplomat? What if you're the next future diplomat? What if you're the next future diplomat? You don't know
Zoom mo sa
that.
kanya yun.
And I think I also observe yung importance ng level of analysis, no?
Yes.
So like when you think
Ooh.
in a perspective of Chinese, of course, sa atin to. But when you observe in the perspective of Filipinos, of course, sa atin din to. So dun nagkaka-conflict. And yan, to conclude, once again, I am Mark.
I am Zara.
I am Nami,
And I am Johan.
And we are...
your IR buddies.
Thank you, guys! Wait.
우연히 널 만났고 너를 사랑하게 됐지 하루와 그 시간이 가는 줄도 몰랐었지 하지만 실증이 났니 아니면 내가 잘못을 했니 갑자기 날 떠나갔고 난 페일이 돼버렸어 그렇게 말지 내 인생 책임져 날 떠나도 너는 행복하니 난 그렇지 않아 내 인생 책임져 너
Search lang.